Have you ever thought about how different cultures and belief systems kind of tackle these huge issues we face, like social inequality?
Yeah.
Well, today we are going to dive into um, Islam's perspective
Mm.
on
Right.
social inequality and discrimination. And we've got some really fascinating source material that lays out
Right.
Islam's approach to this.
Uh-huh.
And there's some really interesting ideas in here, like some stuff you might not expect.
Yeah, I think a lot of people might have some preconceived notions.
Right, right. Like, get this. They've got a yearly event where
Huh.
everybody dresses the same way. It doesn't matter how rich or famous they are.
Yeah, that's the Hajj pilgrimage. It's a really powerful symbol of the emphasis on equality in Islam. And while a lot of people, as I said, may have these preconceived notions, Islam actually offers this very structured approach
Yeah.
to addressing social challenges and these issues of inequality. And it's so important, especially, in our increasingly interconnected world,
Right.
to try to understand these different perspectives, for sure. So let's unpack this. So our source material highlights this core principle in Islam. All humans are equal in the sight of Allah, no matter what.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter their race or their ethnicity or gender or social standing.
Right. And that concept of inherent equality,
Mhm.
it's woven throughout Islamic teachings and practices. It's not just like an abstract idea.
Right.
It has real implications for how Muslims are supposed to interact with each other
Yeah,
and how society should be structured.
exactly. Yeah. And the Quran directly states this in chapter 49, verse 13.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. It says, "O mankind, we have created you from a male and a female and made you peoples and tribes so that you may know one another. Verily, the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous of you." So it's not about your background. It's about your actions and character. That's what truly matters.
Mm-hmm. And that verse so directly challenges that whole notion of inherent superiority based on, lineage or social status, which
Right.
has been so prevalent throughout history in different cultures.
Mm-hmm. It's a really powerful message that resonates across cultures and time periods.
For sure, yeah. And, building on that idea of equality, Islam is firmly against racism and tribalism.
Oh, absolutely.
And this might surprise some people, but
Well, it shouldn't, because if you look at the Prophet Muhammad's farewell sermon,
yeah.
he very clearly states, "An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab over an Arab. A white person has no superiority over a black person, nor a black person over a white person, except by piety and good action." I mean, the statement was made centuries ago, yet it feels incredibly relevant to the issues we're still facing today. It encourages us to look at our own societies
Yeah.
and think about where these kinds of divisions and prejudices
Yeah.
still exist.
So I'm kind of curious about how Islam approaches women's rights within this framework of equality.
Well, Islam grants women spiritual equality and also outlines specific social and legal rights,
Yeah.
which is something that unfortunately is often overlooked or misunderstood.
Okay, so it's not just a spiritual concept.
Right.
There are tangible rights associated with
That's
it.
exactly.
What are some examples of those?
Sure. So the Quran very clearly states that women have the right to inherit property.
You're talking about Quran 4.7, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. That's a very concrete example of
That's a legal right?
a legal right that's given to women.
Okay.
And there's more. They're granted the right to own their own property, to engage in business and economic activities. And these rights were established, centuries ago, which is pretty amazing when you think about the historical context
Right.
in many other parts of the world.
That challenges some assumptions that people may have.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about empowering women, not just within their family structure, but also
Mhm.
within society as a whole.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, let's switch gears a little bit and let's talk about economic justice. How does Islam approach issues of poverty and wealth disparity?
Well, Islam has these built-in mechanisms to address economic inequalities and to prevent the exploitation of the poor, which is a huge problem.
Can you give us some specific examples
Yeah.
of how that actually works?
Yeah, so a really key concept in Islam is something called zakat, which is a mandatory form of charity.
Okay.
It's not just a suggestion, it's a religious obligation for Muslims
Right.
who meet certain criteria.
So it's a built-in system for redistributing wealth and ensuring that the more fortunate members of society are contributing to the well-being of the less fortunate.
Mhm.
What about the lending practices? Are there any regulations to prevent exploitation in that area.
Absolutely. Islam strictly prohibits something called usury or riba, which is essentially charging excessive interest on loans,
Okay.
which
Yeah.
is something that can trap people in a cycle of debt
Right.
and perpetuate poverty. By forbidding this practice, Islam aims to create a more ethical and equitable financial system.
That makes a lot of sense. It's interesting to see how these principles are designed to create a more just and balanced society. And this commitment to fairness doesn't seem to end with individual actions. Islam seems to also emphasize justice when it comes to governance and leadership.
Absolutely. You're totally right. Islam emphasizes justice in all areas of life,
Yep.
and that includes how societies are governed.
Mhm.
Leaders are expected to uphold fairness, to be accountable for their actions, and to really serve the people.
Which actually resonates with modern concepts
Yeah.
like transparency and accountability in government, right?
Exactly.
And the Quran actually addresses this quite directly.
It does.
How does it say?
So the Quran states, "Indeed, Allah commands you to render trusts to whom they are due, and when you judge between people to judge with justice." So this verse really highlights the importance of fulfilling obligations,
Mm.
being trustworthy, judging matters fairly, and again, regardless of an individual's status or background.
Yeah.
These principles, even though they're rooted in ancient teachings, offer really valuable insights
Right.
for contemporary societies grappling with these issues. It's incredible how some of these ideas just transcend time and cultural boundaries,
Yeah, for sure.
and they're still so applicable.
So we've talked about how Islam kind of approaches inequality from like a structural and systemic perspective. But what about fostering that sense of unity and connection between people? Does Islam have anything to say about that?
Absolutely. I mean, a really core concept in Islam is this idea of the Ummah, which refers to the global community
Let's
of
hear it.
believers.
So it's more than just like a religious identity. It's like a sense of belonging to a
Yeah.
larger community.
It emphasizes shared faith and values
Mm-hmm.
and this idea of mutual support.
Mm.
There's a really beautiful saying of the Prophet Muhammad that captures this sense of interconnectedness, he said. "The believers in their mutual kindness, compassion, and sympathy are like one body. When one part suffers, the whole body responds with sleeplessness and fever."
Wow. That's a powerful image.
It
It
is.
really highlights the empathy and solidarity that are like central to the idea of the Ummah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it makes you think about the strength and resilience
Yeah.
that can come from being a part of a community that truly cares for one another.
Absolutely. It underscores this idea that, like, we're not isolated, but rather part of a collective whole
Right.
where everyone's well-being is interconnected.
So our source material also emphasizes the importance of knowledge
Yes,
in combating ignorance, and we know that ignorance is often like a root cause of discrimination.
it is.
How does Islam approach this pursuit of knowledge?
Well, knowledge is incredibly valued in Islam. It's seen as a path to understanding and enlightenment,
Mm-hmm.
and ultimately to a closer relationship with God.
And it's so interesting that the very first word revealed in the Quran is read, which seems to set the stage for a faith that prioritizes learning
Yes.
and critical thinking.
Absolutely. It's a call to explore, to question, to understand the world around us, and to use that knowledge to, like, dispel these harmful misconceptions and stereotypes.
So it's not just about accumulating knowledge.
Right.
It's about using it to make the world a better place,
Yes.
a more just and equitable world.
Exactly.
You've talked about equality, justice, unity, and knowledge.
Mm.
But there's this other crucial element that I think is so essential for building a harmonious society, and that's forgiveness
Oh, absolutely.
and compassion.
Forgiveness and compassion are absolutely central to Islamic teachings.
Hmm.
Holding on to anger and resentment can be incredibly destructive, both on an individual and a societal level.
Right.
And Islam encourages Muslims and really, everyone to let go of those negative feelings and to choose reconciliation instead.
It's about breaking that cycle.
Exactly, yeah. Breaking the cycle of negativity and hate. And, there's a verse in the Quran that really prompts us to think about this. It says, "And let them pardon and overlook. Would you not like that Allah should forgive you?"
Mhm.
This verse is really encouraging us to consider the transformative power of forgiveness,
Right.
both in our own lives and also in terms of how it can help us to heal divisions within our communities.
So we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We've talked about everything from the foundational principles of equality to the practical applications of economic justice
Mm-hmm.
to the importance of unity, knowledge, and forgiveness. But I'm still kind of curious. How do these principles actually translate into tangible actions?
Right.
Are there specific examples of how these ideas manifest themselves in everyday life?
Definitely. I think one of the most powerful and compelling examples is the Hajj pilgrimage.
Okay.
Millions of Muslims from every corner of the globe
Yeah.
journey to Mecca each year, dressed in these simple white garments that symbolize their equality before God.
It's like this visual reminder that material wealth and social status don't matter
Exactly.
when it comes to faith.
They become insignificant.
When shared humanity, yeah.
Ugh.
Everyone's standing together as equals.
And that emphasis on equality isn't just limited to the Hajj. Even in their daily prayers, 5 times a day,
Yeah.
Muslims stand shoulder to shoulder in congregation, regardless of their background or their social standing.
Right.
Which is a really simple but powerful act that just reinforces this idea that we're all equal in the eyes of God.
It's amazing to see how these principles are actually woven into the fabric of Islamic practices, from these grand pilgrimages to the everyday rituals.
Absolutely.
It's not just about theory, it's about living these values.
Right.
So it seems like Islam offers a really holistic perspective on how to address social inequality, encompassing both individual actions and systemic change.
Yeah, I think that's a really insightful way to put it. It encourages both personal reflection and growth, as well as advocating for broader societal transformations that promote justice and equity for all.
So as we start to wrap up our deep dive into Islam's perspective on social inequality, what are some key takeaways that we want our listeners to leave with?
Well, I think the biggest one is that Islam offers this really profound and often misunderstood framework for addressing these challenges that we're facing today, whether we're talking about racism, sexism, poverty, whatever it may be.
It really emphasizes the inherent dignity and equality of every human being. And it doesn't just state these principles, it actually provides concrete guidance for how to put them into action in our lives.
Exactly. It tackles these really tough issues like racism, promotes women's rights, advocates for economic justice, and really stresses the importance of things like unity and knowledge and forgiveness in creating a more harmonious and just society.
And these principles can offer valuable insights and potential solutions for anyone, really, regardless of background or beliefs.
I agree.
So we're going to conclude this episode by leaving you with a thought-provoking question to consider.
Sounds good.
How might these Islamic principles inspire you to think differently about social inequality and the role that you can play in addressing these challenges within your own sphere of influence?
It's an invitation to reflect, to learn, and to actually take action in ways that promote understanding, compassion, and justice for all.
And if you've enjoyed this deep dive, please subscribe to our podcast and share it with your friends.
Keep those minds curious.
Yeah.
And never stop seeking deeper understanding.
We love exploring these big ideas with you, and we really hope this deep dive has given you some new perspectives to kind of think about and consider.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
It has, yeah. Until next time, keep diving deep.
Keep those minds curious.
Into the world of knowledge.
And remember that this pursuit of understanding and justice is a journey we're all on together.
It really is.